Hi card making friends, it's Sandy here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have more embossing folder fun and I'm playing with distressed oxide inks too. I'm sharing two techniques to easily add color to your projects. Today's colors are Squeezed Lemonade, Ripe Persimmon, and Festive Berries. We're going to do a quick watercolor wash, we're going to do some ink blending, and then we're going to make cards with the March Spellbinders embossing folders, the 3D tiled motif, and the stylized Calla Lily. I'm using the Canson watercolor paper 140 pound, and I've taken one sheet and cut it in half. This will be plenty big enough for the projects today. I've also got some water, an inkwell, a wide brush, a pipette, and a spray bottle just in case I need it. Some paper towel off to the side to lay my wet pieces on, and I'm working on top of my white glass mat, which I love because it's super easy for cleanup. So you're going to shake these little bottles until the little steely inside starts rolling around and mixing the blend together for you, and then put a couple of squirts of each color into the wells. I have green in there. I was working on another project the other day. We're not using green today, just a heads up there. So I'm going to use the pipette, and I am going to add a little bit of water back in because these have been sitting on my work table for a couple of days. So we'll let those get going. In the meantime, I'm using my nice wide brush and I'm adding water down the entire front of my piece of watercolor paper. I'm not going to bother taping this down or attaching it to a sticky mat because I'm only laying down one color and I'm not really worried about what's going to happen because by the time we emboss it and everything, you won't notice any imperfections. Basically what I'm doing is I'm going for a wash coverage, and I'm going to be able to cut this down to a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so it doesn't matter if I have fingerprints on the edge or if I got white spots. None of those, don't worry about them. Just enjoy the process. Okay, so a quick rag cleanup, and we're going to change colors. I'm just going to clean out my brush. And the pigment from the distressed oxide inks is quite thick, so you do need a clean and a dirty bucket of water. I'm using canning jars. That was the first thing I could find when I went downstairs looking for something to put water in, so there you go. Old coffee cups work really well too, just don't forget which one's got your coffee in it. Okay, so this is the Festive Berries, and the first one I did, I believe, was Ripe Persimmon. And I just love this one. It dries to kind of a really pinky red color, which is really pretty for the cards I've been playing with. So why am I doing this? Because I couldn't find the color cardstock that I wanted. So I've decided I have all these reinkers that I seldom use. I'm going to start making my own cardstock. Okay, so I've already got a yellow one, so I'm just going to do a quick cleanup here because I'm done with showing you how easy it is to do these watercolors, and we're going to move on to ink blending. Okay, again, I'm working on my glass craft mat from Glassboard Studios. I have a link at the bottom of my video and over on my blog if you're interested in them. They're a fabulous tool in the workshop and so easy to clean up. So I'm staying with my same three colors. They are my theme colors for this month for all my Spellbinders little goodies that I'm making to share with you. And I am starting with the lightest color, which obviously is the Squeezed Lemonade, and using my blending tool. This card front is Hammer Mill White 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and as I said, I'm splitting it into threes. Now I've got the Persimmon, which is my middle color, and blending that across. I find when I blend, I like to go all the way across and get all three colors done, and it kind of sits into the paper a little bit, and the second time you go back with the colors, it sits on top and it seems to blend a little bit better. So that's how I like to roll. Everybody's kind of got their own way of doing ink blending. I'm also holding on to my paper now with a piece of paper towel so that I don't get my fingerprints into that fresh ink that I just put down. And putting down the Festive Berries, which is that pinky red color that I love so much. Okay, cleaning up so that I'm not going to pick any of that up when I go back and do my second coat. Coming back in, and I'm going to blend a line together first between the red and the orange. Coming back in with the yellow and adding my second layer of that. And you see it really does fill in everything. It also helps to blend where the two colors bleed together and gives it kind of a nice ombre that it slowly gravitates from one color to the next. Okay, we don't need to have perfection here because we are going to be doing all kinds of crazy things with this paper. This one, I decided I'm going to do the entire thing in Festive Berries. It's going to be all one color. So I am just madly adding the color and getting it more or less even. Like I said, don't worry about it too much because by the time we're finished embossing, we're going to be doing a little bit of ink overlay on some of these. You won't even notice any imperfections. And if you do, it just kind of gives a little bit more texture and depth of field to your finished card front. They're just really pretty and they're really easy. And you don't need to be an artist to do any of this. So you see, I'm just quickly filling in, going back and looking for some obvious white spots. There's not too many of them. And there we go. Now it's time to emboss all of our pieces. Now that the ink is all dry, I've cut them all down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I have lots of leftovers, and there's a reason for that. We'll get to it near the end of this video, so don't throw any of that out. I got my platform pieces. I'm going to be using the base and the D. Shows you right here on your platform base what your sandwich is for using these embossing folders. I'm starting with the 3D embossing folder, the tiled motif, and that is the March 2023 3D folder from Spellbinders, and I'm going to be embossing 3 times. You want the writing facing you so that the embossing is popped up on your card, and you're going to pop it into the sandwich and run it through the Platinum 6 die cutting machine. And here we go. Isn't that pretty? And we're going to be having a little bit of fun with that. Next, we're using the Stylized Calla Lily, and this is the regular embossing folder club for March 2023 from Spellbinders, and I'm popping that pretty pinky red one in, lining it up and putting it through. And once I get this through, I notice I'm not getting a lot of resistance from the machine, which means that it's not embossing very deeply. So 2 things are going to happen here. I am going to get my spritzer. I'm going to spritz the back of this paper because that gets the fiber nice and wet, allowing it to emboss deeper without tearing. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple of shims to this. So right now I have to position this back into the embossing folder and try and get it into the same place where I was. And I'm just kind of doing that off camera down in the corner there, lining it up so that I can emboss it again. I think I got it where I liked it. And I'm going to add a couple of shims. There we go. Here's my second one. And these shims are just pieces of cardstock that are basically the same size as the embossing folder. You'll see one of them is actually the cardstock from one of the embossing folders. I don't throw anything out. You may need it. Running it through twice to make sure I get a nice deep embossed image, knocking everything over on my work table. And there we go, a much deeper embossed image. You'll see there's a little bit of cracking. Don't worry about it. We're going to be doing some ink application that will cover it right up. Here we go. Here's all 5 pieces that I have embossed, and we're going to be playing with them, but we want to make sure that they're nice and dry because, of course, I did spritz the back of some of them, and we're going to play with some technique. For the first one, I'm using a sanding block, and I'm actually sanding the ink off so that the white shows through on this beautiful detail. I really like the detail on this tiled motif. It reminds me of tin ceilings in old houses. Going to do the same thing with the yellow one. And really, you're just sanding. Don't press too hard because you do not want to deboss what you just spent all that time embossing. And really, you don't need to put a lot of pressure on it to get that top coat off. It comes off quite easily. Okay, so there's the first 2. Now we're going to do something different with this one. For this one, I'm actually going to take the Festive Berries, which is what we used when we were inking this one up. And this is the one that we did the blending on. And I'm very lightly touching the ink pad just to the raised part of the embossing and coloring it in. So instead of turning white, this one is going a darker red color. And see how it really makes that background pop out, all the light spots? I really like this. I like all these techniques, but they're all kind of unique. And you just want to run around and make sure that you got a little bit of ink on all of the spots that are sticking up. Okay, next we're going to play with the tri-colored piece, and I've got my ink pads and my blending tools back out again, and we are very lightly going to go over top of each of these, and basically what we're doing is covering in any of those little cracks that showed up while we were doing our embossing. And we're also going to start dirtying up the colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this orange, the persimmon, and once I've got all of the little white spots covered, I'm going to run it over top of the yellow. And it's going to highlight just the raised pieces. See how I'm just really, really lightly going over it? I haven't sped this up because I want to show you the process. And I'm going back and making sure that I have all of those little white spots covered and blending it nicely. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the other color, which is the Festive Berries. Okay, and I'm pulling that over top of the orange, and you see that it's darker, so it's helping all those little embossed lines show up really nicely. And I'm pulling it all the way out, almost to the yellow in some spots, just to blend it nicely. And so then I'm turning this around because I have to cover up all those little white cracks. And here's where I said don't worry about them because they get buried under all of this ink when we finished this panel. So just lightly going over it. You don't want to get heavy because you don't want to get down into the nooks and crannies. You want the difference in the color. You want the embossing to be standing up and taking the darker color. And you see now I'm going sideways over top of this just so that the red gets on top of the blend. And I actually went and grabbed another ink pad, Candied Apple, which is a little bit darker of a red. And I brought that in just to see if I could darken it up a tiny little bit. But it didn't really make that much of a difference. So you could give that a try if you wanted to. Isn't this pretty? It's one of my favorite techniques. Okay, so I think I got that one the way I want. We've got one left to do, and that is our pinky red one, and it's done with a Calla Lily embossing folder as well. So once again, I'm coming in with the Festive Berries because that's the color that I used on this one, and I am just lightly adding the color to the top, trying to get to darken the embossed image that's popped up, as well as covering the little white cracks. And this is where I brought in the Candied Apple because I thought, that might be a little bit darker, might work, might not. Let's see. I didn't really notice a big difference. I was thinking about dragging the ink pad over top of this one, but there is so much embossing on this one that I wasn't sure that I wasn't going to lose the entire embossed image by putting too much ink on it. So that's why I'm using the brush still and just very gently going over top. And it's coming out nicely. It gets kind of a really suede look to it by the time it's done. There we go. This one's really soft and subtle and pretty. And suede-y. Is that a word? Alrighty then, we have 5 cards on the go, so I cut 5 bases, and again, hammer mill, 4 1/4 by 11, scored and folded at 5 1/2, and I have got my scoring tool sitting out there because I like to use the corner of it to line up my card fronts. So what I'm doing is I'm using tear tape here just to go around the outside edge of my card front. I like this tear tape, it's nice and strong, and this is Simon Says Stamps tape. I quite like it. Jam that card into that top left-hand corner and use that ridge on the 2 sides to line up that card front. And look at that, pops on there just like it knows what it's doing. Okay, we're going to do some decorative elements for the top of these, and I'm going to be using the Die of the Month Floral Butterfly and the Butterfly Burst Clear Stamp and Die Set for all of the cards today. And here they are all finished, just magic. There was about an hour's worth of die cutting in there that I saved you from. Okay, so what I did was I used the little butterfly from the clear stamp set on these first 3. And these 3 are all done with the tiled motif embossing folder. And then I used, what I'm showing you, are the stems from the Die of the Month, the small Die of the Month set, to get the gold flowers that are kind of coming out his bum down the side. And then gold emboss the sentiments from the stamp set. Okay, so here's all 3 of these. in all 3 different colors. And then the other 2 that are done with the stylized calla lily, I actually cut out the little butterfly, and then I did the overlay with the little branch flowers, and I did those all in gold, and then I did gold down the side, and I used my leftover colored paper that I either watercolored or ink blended to make all of the pretty little flowers so that they would all match. This butterfly, I actually did the ink blend, really small version, so that I had all 3 of the colors on that little butterfly. And here we go. Here's all 5 of the cards for you. I think they turned out really cool. So here's the other cards that I shared at the beginning of the week, and I did have a couple of questions on this one. Everybody wanted to know where I got these 2 colors from, and that's why I decided to do this video today. They're done exactly the same way. I just die cut them after I was finished watercoloring it and ink blending. And then here's the glimmer one, and it uses the same ink blend as this one. It's just the other way around. Just turn the card over. They're exactly the same. I just didn't get quite too dark on the Festive Berries one. So that's where that came from. Anyway, everything I used today on all these cards is linked underneath this video. There's also a link over to my blog where there is a detailed description and a breakdown of all the supplies I used, along with little clicked images for your shopping convenience. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please consider giving me a thumbs up and sharing it with your friends. And until next time, toodles!